Hey guys, it's Charles from Tech Always, and a few weeks ago at Microcenter, I bought a Zotac GTX 970 for just $83 when it was an open box clearance deal. So this was pretty crazy, and this card is going to perform somewhere between a 1060 6GB and 3GB, which are going for $250 plus to $180 plus, even on Black Friday during sales. So for just $83, that's some pretty good performance, especially when you're getting it basically new. So I only bought this card because it was such a great deal. I kind of didn't really think about it. I didn't have any builds planned or anything, and it's just been kind of sitting around for the past few weeks. But I thought to myself, that was such a good deal at Microcenter. What could I do if I went to Microcenter in one day and bought the rest of the parts for the entire build? So this is going to be my $400 Microcenter one day challenge PC build. Let's get right into it. Let's start for the CPU because it's kind of the centerpiece of any build, and with this build, I decided to go Team Red and picked up an AMD Ryzen R5 1500X for just $144. This is one of the quad-core Ryzen 5 CPUs, not one of the 6 cores like the 1600 or 1600X, but because it has SMT, you still get 8 threads. So this might not seem like the best deal because you can get a Ryzen 5 1400 at basically any time for $150, and the 1500X and the 1400 overclock to similar levels. But because this is the 1500X, it comes with the Wraith Spire cooler, not the Wraith Stealth. So this one has a 95 watt TDP. And because I didn't have room in the budget for an aftermarket cooler, that bigger stock cooler is definitely going to come in handy when it comes for the overclocking stage of this build. So for the motherboard, I went with the Gigabyte GA AB350 Gaming 3 motherboard. Not big on motherboard names, they get way too long. But this is a pretty decent B350 board, and while it's cheap, it doesn't have the bare minimum because you still get some VRM heatsinks and even an RGB strip on the side. But the best part of this board, and definitely the real reason I picked it up, was the price. So normally this board is somewhere between $180, but I found an open box one for just $70. So because I paired it with the CPU, I was able to get a $30 coupon off the motherboard. And the board also had a $20 rebate, so that brought the final price of this board down to just $20, and it will still allow me to overclock, so that's just insane, and I was really happy to pick it up. Finding memory for this build was a bit of a struggle, because I remember thinking that memory prices were crazy back in the spring when I did my $250 all new build, and I was able to get 8GB for $50. But prices have only gotten worse since then, and now you can't really get 8GB of DDR4 for anything less than like $80, and normally it costs even more than that, which is just insane, and I really couldn't fit anything like that into the budget. I knew my good friend Marko from TechStream was struggling to find memory for an upcoming build on his channel, so I looked around and I found an open box deal on a 2400 MHz kit of G.Skill's Aegis memory, and it was a 2x8GB kit, so 16GB total, and I hit him up asking if he wanted to split it with me, and he hopped in on the idea. So once you take that and you cut it in half because he paid for half of it, I was left with one 8GB stick of 2400 MHz memory for just $61, which is pretty good considering what they're at now. Still a crazy price and more than what 16GB cost a year ago, but considering the current landscape, I was actually okay with this. So looking a bit more into the 970 I picked up, it's a Zotac mini model. So this thing doesn't have the best cooler and it doesn't have the highest out of the box overclocks, but I think we can fix that when we get to the manual overclocking stage of this build. But this card should still perform well, and I'm really excited to see how it runs in this build, as I've never actually used a 970 before, even though it was so popular before Pascal came out. For storage, I went with the Toshiba P300 1TB 7200 RPM hard drive. This was only $32, which isn't a crazy good deal, but it's pretty decent and not super hard to find at Microcenter, as they generally have something for around this price. So this won't be too fast, it's not going to be anything like an SSD, which I couldn't fit into this build, but it should still give you lots of space to store games and whatever other files you need. For the power supply, I picked up a Cooler Master Watt Light 500 watt 80 plus power supply. Just a tip, Cooler Master, don't use two words twice in one product name, just a tip. So this isn't the best power supply and doesn't have the highest certifications or anything, but Microcenter had some pretty inflated PSU prices. I wasn't really sure why, but this was kind of the cheapest 500 watt that seemed semi-reliable, so I went with it, especially because it was $25 after a $10 rebate. When I first unboxed this thing though, I wasn't sure if I should be putting it in a PC build or a fridge, because this thing has some of the ugliest ketchup and mustard cables that I've ever seen on a power supply. But that doesn't really matter, I guess, because the case doesn't really have very big window. But getting into that case, it's the Thermaltake V3, and this thing has actually the smallest window I've ever seen on a PC case. It's smaller than a 120mm fan. But I can't really complain, it was really cheap at just $24 after tax, and it has a nice front mesh for lots of airflow and an included 120mm LED fan. So that's all the parts in this build. The final cost came out to just $394, which is actually really good considering the mid-range hardware that we have in here. If you went to buy it somewhere else like Amazon or Newegg and you didn't have all these deals, it would probably cost you closer to $600, especially if you were to replace that 970 with a 1063 gig, as you can't really get new 970s most places. But now let's build this PC and see what kind of overclocks we can get before we start doing some benchmarks. So as you guys can see, the build is done and I just finished finalizing the overclocks I'm going to be using in the benchmarks. So on the CPU, it's going to be running at 3.85 GHz, which isn't great for Ryzen. I was actually a little disappointed in this. Ryzen can normally get up to 3.9 or sometimes 4 GHz if it's a good chip, but I just wasn't able to hit that and got stuck at 3.85, which is still decent for gaming, and it's probably a mix of just a bad chip and the Wraith Spire cooler not being great, because while it's good for a stock cooler, it still can't compare to a decent aftermarket cooler. And then on the GTX 970, I was able to get plus 171 MHz on the core. So this is a pretty decent 970 overclock. It's nothing crazy, but considering how small the cooler is and how quiet it's able to stay, I'm pretty happy with this. So those are the overclocks I'm going to be using in the benchmarks. So now I'm going to go and finish those up and I'll show you them when I'm done.
Ryan Little.
Okay, so I was actually really impressed with how this PC performed, and I know I say that about every single build I do on this channel, but with this one it was especially true. The 0.1% lows on every single game tested except for PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which is notoriously badly optimized, were above 60 FPS. So that means you were getting a really smooth gaming experience on every single game. And keep in mind, games were tested at max settings or nearly max settings across the board, so that's even more impressive. This CPU-GPU combo paired really well together and definitely hit that 1080p sweet spot that I was going for, where you can play high-end games at high settings and still get really good FPS. So this PC really goes to show that if you have resources like Microcenter around you, you should definitely take advantage of them, as you can get some killer deals on brand new hardware that can definitely bring up the price to performance of your PC. And I also guess this is kind of my holiday build because I have a red CPU and a green GPU. I think that's how it works, right? So happy holidays everybody, and I hope you guys enjoyed this $400 one-day build challenge holiday build. I definitely enjoyed making it, but if you guys did like it, then be sure to hit that like button. If you have any suggestions, be sure to leave a comment down below. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe. And if you want a behind the scenes look on the channel, be sure to follow me on Twitter at TechAlways with 2 S's. Thanks for watching. Bye.
What are you talking
The camera.
about? Yourself.
No, I don't do that.
Oh, you're making the video?
Making the video.